Right now, as you're lying here in the dark, you might notice something. A slight tension in your chest. A subtle awareness of sounds outside your window. Maybe your heart beats just a little faster than it should. Maybe you're scanning the shadows in your room. Your brain quietly cataloguing every shape, every movement, every possibility. This isn't anxiety in the clinical sense. You're not having a panic attack. You're safe in your bed, door locked, surrounded by the trappings of modern security, and yet some part of you remains alert, vigilant, waiting for something that will probably never come. Here's what you need to know. That feeling, that sly edge of watchfulness that keeps you from fully relaxing even when logic says you should, it's not a flaw in your psychology. It's not evidence that something's wrong with you. It's a gift, an inheritance, a survival mechanism so old, so fundamental, so deeply woven into the fabric of what it means to be human that you couldn't get rid of it even if you tried. That feeling is fear, and it's been with your family for 300,000 years. But here's what makes this so fascinating and perhaps so comforting if you're lying here struggling with anxiety tonight. The fear you feel right now, the nameless worry that occasionally visits you in the dark, is not responding to your current reality. It's responding to a world that doesn't exist anymore. A world where the dark actually was dangerous. Where that sound outside your window might actually have been something that could kill you. Where letting your guard down for even a moment could mean you'd never wake up. Your fear is ancient. It's speaking a language older than words, warning you about dangers that vanished 10,000 years ago. And yet it persists, vigilant, tireless, keeping watch over threats that exist only in evolutionary memory. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to follow that feeling backward through time. We're going to walk through the long African night when fear first learned to speak in human hearts. We're going to explore the moments when being afraid meant the difference between your ancestors leaving descendants and your genetic line ending abruptly in the jaws of something with better night vision than you'll ever have. We're going to trace how fear shaped not just individual survival, but the entire architecture of human consciousness, human society, human civilization itself. And maybe, just maybe, understanding where this feeling comes from will help you make peace with it. Not eliminate it. You can't eliminate 300,000 years of evolutionary wisdom. But perhaps you can stop fighting it. Stop judging yourself for feeling afraid when logic says there's nothing to fear. Because your body knows something your conscious mind has forgotten. The dark was dangerous. For a very, very long time. If you're using this to fall asleep, that's exactly why I make these videos. So maybe subscribe and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always check the comments and it's fascinating. Someone in Melbourne at sunrise, someone in Detroit at midnight, someone in Berlin in the quiet hours before dawn. All of us lying in our safe modern beds feeling echoes of fears that kept our ancestors alive, when safety was something you earned every single night by staying alert. So get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. You don't need to fight the vigilance or you don't need to force yourself to relax. Just listen. And let's walk together into the deep past, to a time when the fear you're feeling tonight made perfect terrible sense. Picture this. It's 200,000 years ago, give or take a few millennia. Somewhere in East Africa, as the sun drops toward the horizon, a small band of early humans begins the nightly ritual that will define their existence for the next 100,000 years. They are gathering closer together, not consciously, not with discussion or planning, just a subtle drift toward proximity as the light changes. Children who have been playing at the edges of the camp now stay within arm's reach of adults. The women who've been gathering plants throughout the day return earlier than they did yesterday, eyes scanning the tree line. The men who've been hunting drift back, spears still ready, never quite turning their backs on the lengthening shadows. This isn't paranoia. This is realism. Because something changes when the sun goes down, something fundamental about the balance of power between humans and everything else that moves in the dark. You see, your ancestors had a problem. A serious existential problem that they carried with them every single day of their lives. They were weak. Not weak in spirit or intelligence or adaptability, weak in the ways that mattered after dark. Their night vision was terrible. Is terrible, you have the same eyes they did. Compared to the predators that shared their world, humans in low light might as well have been blind. A lion can see 6 times better than you in darkness. A leopard can hunt in conditions where you wouldn't be able to see your own hand in front of your face. The hyenas that prowled the edges of human camps, waiting for someone to wander too far, they could navigate by starlight with ease. Your ancestors couldn't. They were slow. Oh, they could run if they needed to, could maintain a steady jog for hours in daylight, could outlast almost any prey animal in persistence hunting. But in a sprint, in the sudden explosive need for speed when something with claws erupted from the darkness, they were hopelessly outmatched. The predators of the African night were faster, stronger, better armed, better everything. Except one thing. Humans could be afraid, not just startle responses, not just the automatic flinch when something moves suddenly. Real fear. Anticipatory fear. The ability to lie awake at night imagining all the terrible things that might be waiting just beyond the firelight. The capacity to feel afraid of something that hasn't happened yet, might not ever happen, but could happen if you're not careful. This seems like a curse, doesn't it? Lying there worrying about unlikely scenarios. Feeling your heart race over dangers that exist only in imagination. Losing sleep to fears that will never materialize. But here's the thing. The humans who couldn't imagine danger, who couldn't conjure up worst-case scenarios and plan around them, who couldn't feel afraid until the danger was right in front of them, those humans didn't leave descendants. They died. Usually young, usually suddenly, usually in ways that could have been avoided if only they'd been a little more afraid a little bit earlier. Your fear, the anxiety that visits you in quiet moments, the slight dread that colours your thoughts sometimes for no clear reason, that's not a malfunction. That's the echo of every ancestor who survived long enough to reproduce, because they paid attention to that feeling, because they took it seriously, because they understood that being a little bit afraid all the time was the price of not being very dead very suddenly. Let's talk about what it actually meant to be afraid 200,000 years ago. Not in abstract evolutionary terms, but in the moment-to-moment experience of being alive in a world that was genuinely dangerous in ways we can barely imagine now. The day ends. The sun, which has been your ally, your protection, your source of safety, begins to sink. And with it goes your primary defense against becoming someone else's dinner. You watch it go, everyone does. There's no ignoring sunset when sunset means the beginning of the dangerous hours. The light shifts from white to gold to amber to red. Long shadows stretch across the savanna. The temperature drops rapidly. That peculiar chill that comes in tropical regions when the sun vanishes. And something in your chest tightens. This isn't conscious. You don't think, oh, I should feel afraid now. You just do. Your body knows what comes next. It's been through this thousands of times. Every night of your life, this moment arrives, and every night the same response cascades through your nervous system. Your pupils dilate slightly, trying to capture every photon of remaining light. Your hearing sharpens, background noise fading as your auditory cortex focuses on detecting sounds that don't belong. Your muscles tense, preparing for the possibility of sudden movement. Your heartbeat quickens just a bit, ensuring blood flow to major muscle groups in case you need to run. This is fear working, not the screaming panic of immediate danger, but something subtler and more useful. A quiet elevation of readiness, a low-level alarm that says pay attention. The world is different now, the rules have changed, and the rules have changed. In daylight you can see threats coming from hundreds of yards away. You can make informed decisions about whether to approach or avoid. You can read body language, assess situations, choose your responses. In darkness, all of that vanishes. Threats can close to within a few feet before you're aware of them. By the time you see the danger, it's often too late to do anything about it. So fear compensates. It makes you cautious when caution is appropriate. It keeps you close to the fire, close to the group. close to anything that might offer protection. It whispers constant reminders. Don't wander away. Don't let your attention drift. Don't assume safety just because you haven't seen danger yet. And it's exhausting. That's something we don't talk about enough. Maintaining vigilance is metabolically expensive. Your brain, trying to process every sound and shadow as a potential threat, burns through glucose at an elevated rate. Your muscles, held in that slightly tensed ready state, accumulate fatigue. Your cardiovascular system, operating at higher than resting levels for hours, puts stress on your heart. Being afraid is hard work, and your ancestors did it every single night for 10,000 generations. Now you might be thinking, but they had fear. Fire kept predators away. Once they mastered fire, the night became safe. And yes, fire helped. Fire was revolutionary. The ability to create light and warmth on demand was one of the great turning points in human evolution. But fire didn't eliminate the danger. It just created a bubble of relative safety that was always temporary. Fire needs fuel. Someone has to gather wood, and gathering wood in darkness is dangerous. Fire needs tending. Someone has to stay awake to feed it, to ensure it doesn't die out during the critical hours before dawn. Fire has limits. Its light extends only so far. Beyond that circle of illumination, the darkness remains absolute and filled with things that are very interested in the soft, slow mammals clustered around the flames. And fire can go out. Sudden rain could extinguish it. High winds could scatter it. Simple inattention could let it burn down to embers that provide heat, but little light. And when that happened, when the fire failed and the darkness rushed back in, your ancestors were reminded viscerally that their safety was conditional, temporary, dependent on constant effort and vigilance. This is what fear was protecting against. Not imaginary dangers, but real, present, persistent threats that could materialize at any moment. The archaeological record shows this wasn't paranoia. We find human remains from this period bearing the unmistakable signs of predation. Bite marks from big cats, puncture wounds from hyena teeth, partially consumed bodies in caves that were clearly leopard dens. Your ancestors weren't at the top of the food chain. They were somewhere in the middle, successful enough to survive and reproduce, but vulnerable enough that constant vigilance was the price of that success. Fear was the alarm system that kept them alive long enough to become your ancestors. And here's what's remarkable about this fear, what makes it different from simple instinctive reactions. It could learn, it could adapt, it could become more sophisticated with each generation. When something rustled in the bushes, fear made you freeze, made you focus, made you ready to react. But it also made you remember. The next time you heard that particular sound in that particular context, fear would trigger earlier, stronger, giving you more time to respond. Fear taught you patterns, dangerous patterns, without you having to experience the danger directly. This is huge. This meant that humans didn't need to personally survive a leopard attack to learn to be afraid of leopards. They just needed to see what happened to the person who wasn't afraid enough, who wandered too far from the fire, who ignored the low growl in the darkness. Fear could spread through observation, through story, through the simple act of watching what befell those who weren't sufficiently cautious. This created a ratchet effect. Each generation inherited not just the capacity for fear, but specific fears learned by their predecessors. Fear of darkness, fear of being alone, fear of loud, sudden sounds, fear of predators, even predators they'd never personally encountered. The humans who could learn fear from others' mistakes had a massive advantage over those who needed to learn from personal experience. Because personal experience with predators tends to be fatal. So fear became cultural as well as biological. Parents taught children what to be afraid of, not through formal instruction but through modelling. Children watched adults tense at certain sounds, avoid certain places, take precautions at certain times. And they learned. They absorbed those fears, internalized them, carried them forward. And here's where it gets interesting for you lying here tonight. feeling afraid of something you can't quite name. Because this cultural transmission of fear didn't stop 10,000 years ago when humans built the first cities. It didn't stop 200 years ago when we invented electric lights. It hasn't stopped now, in your comfortable bedroom with locks on the doors and police just a phone call away. You inherited those fears, all of them. The fear of darkness, of isolation, of sudden movements, of sounds you can't identify. They're encoded in your nervous system, passed down through an unbroken chain of ancestors who survived because they felt these fears and took them seriously. The world has changed, the threats have vanished, but the fear remains because evolution moves slowly, much more slowly than culture or technology. Your brain is still running software designed for the African savanna 200,000 years ago, and that software is very, very good at detecting danger, sometimes too good. Let's stay in the past a little longer. Let's walk through what a night actually looked like, felt like for your ancestors. Because understanding the context in which fear evolved might help you understand why it feels the way it does now, even when the context has vanished. The sun is gone, the last red glow has faded from the western horizon. Above you, stars are emerging, thousands of them in a sky unpolluted by artificial light. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of light. It's beautiful. You probably don't notice. Because around you the darkness is absolute in a way that you, living in the modern world, have probably never experienced. This isn't the darkness of a room at night where your eyes adjust and you can make out shapes and shadows. This is darkness that swallows everything beyond 5 feet. Darkness where a lion could be standing 10 feet away and you wouldn't see it until it moved. You're sitting with your back to the fire, facing outward. This isn't your choice. It's your turn. Someone always faces outward, always watches, always listens. The rotation happens naturally, silently. Everyone takes their shift through the night, maintaining the vigilance that keeps the group alive. Your eyes scan the darkness beyond the firelight, but they're not much use. Mostly you're listening. Your entire world has narrowed to sound. The crackle of the fire behind you, the quiet breathing of the people near you, the normal sounds of the night, insects, distant animal calls, wind moving through grass. These are okay, these are safe. What you're listening for are the sounds that don't fit. Footfalls too heavy to be harmless. Breathing that's too close. The sudden silence that falls when a predator moves through an area and everything else goes quiet. An hour passes, maybe 2. You have no way to measure time precisely. You judge by the stars, by the feeling of fatigue settling into your body, by the depth of the quiet around you. Nothing has happened. This is good. Most nights nothing happens, but you can't relax, not yet. The most dangerous hours are still ahead. Because here's what your ancestors learned through painful experience. Predators hunt strategically. They wait. They watch. They've learned, just as you have learned, that humans are most vulnerable in the hours after midnight, when exhaustion accumulates, when vigilance naturally flags, when the fire has burned low and needs rebuilding. That's when they come, not every night, not even most nights, but often enough that letting your guard down is potentially fatal. So you stay alert, you fight the fatigue, you keep your spear close and your attention focused outward, and you feel it, that low-level current of fear running through your nervous system, keeping you awake, keeping you ready. This is what fear is for, not the screaming panic when danger materializes, but this quiet, persistent, exhausting vigilance, this refusal to relax even when everything seems safe, this assumption that danger is always possible, always near, always waiting for a moment of inattention. And maybe now you can see why you sometimes feel this way for no apparent reason. Why you lie in your bed in your safe modern home and feel that slight edge of vigilance. Why you can't quite relax even though logically, rationally you know you're safe and you're feeling what your ancestors felt every single night for 200,000 years. The difference is, their fear was calibrated to actual danger. Yours is running on outdated information, warning you about threats that don't exist anymore. But your brain doesn't know that. It's following the same protocols, running the same programs, maintaining the same vigilance that kept your genetic line alive through the long, dangerous night of human evolution. The feeling isn't wrong, it's just late, about 10,000 years late, but in evolutionary time, 10,000 years is nothing. A blink, barely enough time for natural selection to notice, let alone to modify the deep programming of human fear. So you inherit it, all of it. The hypervigilance, the tendency to scan for threats, the difficulty relaxing in darkness, the slight acceleration of heart rate when you're alone, the tendency to imagine worst-case scenarios, the low-level anxiety that colours your experience of the world even when nothing is actively threatening you. These aren't bugs in your psychology, they're features, ancient features, outdated features, but features nonetheless. They worked. For a very, very long time, they worked brilliantly. They kept your ancestors alive in circumstances that would terrify most modern humans if they truly understood them. And now they're yours. An inheritance you didn't ask for, can't return, and have to carry with you every day of your life. The gift and burden of fear passed down through 10,000 generations, still active, still vigilant, still keeping watch over dangers that exist only in evolutionary memory. Let's stay in that moment a bit longer, because there's something else happening around that that's crucial to understanding how fear shaped humanity. You're not alone, that's the whole point. Humans didn't survive the night as individuals, they survived as groups, and fear, that personal internal experience, became a social phenomenon, a shared language of vigilance. When one person tenses at a sound, others notice. When someone's gaze fixes on a point in the darkness, everyone looks. Fear spreads through the group like ripples in water. Not through speech, though that helps, through body language, through the subtle shifts in posture and breathing that signal danger even before conscious thought catches up. This is why you can feel when someone else is afraid, even if they don't say anything. Why a room full of calm people feels different from a room where one person is anxious. You're picking up signals that your ancestors traded every night for 200,000 years. Tiny movements, changes in breathing pattern, the slight widening of eyes, all of it broadcasting, "I sense something, pay attention." This social dimension of fear was revolutionary. It meant that the most vigilant members of the group effectively extended their awareness to everyone. The person with the sharpest hearing, the keenest eyesight, the most developed sense of danger, they became an early warning system for the entire band. Their fear protected not just themselves, but everyone around them. And this created an interesting dynamic. The people who were too fearful, who jumped at every sound, who saw danger where none existed, they were exhausting to be around. They cried wolf too often. The group learned to calibrate their responses to these individuals, to discount their alarms slightly. But the people who were never afraid, who remained calm and unconcerned while everyone else tensed at approaching danger, they didn't last long. And worse, they endangered everyone around them. Their lack of fear meant they'd wander into situations that put the whole group at risk. So there was selection pressure for a middle ground. Not the most fearful, not the least fearful, but appropriately fearful. Afraid when fear was warranted, calm when it wasn't, and crucially able to communicate fear states to others without either causing constant panic or failing to warn of genuine danger. This is still with you. You can probably think of people in your life who seem anxious about everything, and people who seem fearless to the point of recklessness, and you somewhere in between trying to calibrate your own fear responses to actual risk levels. That's 200,000 years of social evolution working through you. The hours pass, the fire burns lower. Someone adds wood carefully, quietly, trying not to disturb those who've managed to fall into light, fitful sleep. But you're still awake, still watching, still listening, and you're tired. That's important to understand. This vigilance, this constant low-level activation of your fear response, it's metabolically expensive in ways that aren't obvious until you've maintained it for hours. Your brain is working overtime. Every sound must be evaluated, threat or not threat. Every shadow must be assessed, animal or just wind-moving vegetation. Every change in the environment, temperature drop, wind shift, a subtle smell on the air, all of it processed, categorized, assigned a threat level. This requires keeping large portions of your cortex active when they'd rather shut down for the night. It requires maintaining elevated levels of stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline coursing through your system at levels higher than daytime baseline but lower than acute panic. It requires your muscles to stay slightly tensed, ready to explode into action, but not so tense that they fatigue completely. And it requires something else, something that will become crucial to understanding human fear. It requires imagination. Because unlike simple startle responses, which are automatic and don't require thought, this sustained vigilance requires you to imagine scenarios, to run mental simulations of potential dangers. What if that sound is a leopard? What if those eyes reflecting the firelight belong to a hyena testing the perimeter? What if the person on watch falls asleep and the fire dies and something comes close enough to grab someone on the edge of the group? Your ancestors had to be able to imagine these scenarios vividly enough to take them seriously, to maintain precautions against possibilities that hadn't happened yet and might never happen. They had to be able to feel afraid of things that existed only in imagination. This is huge. This is where human fear diverges from the fear of other animals. A gazelle is afraid when it sees a lion. An antelope startles and runs when it hears a sudden sound. But humans can be afraid of the lion they haven't seen yet. The danger that might materialize tomorrow, or next week, or next year. This capacity for anticipatory fear, for anxiety about possible future threats, it seems like a curse. And in your modern life it often is. You lie awake worrying about job interviews, medical tests, difficult conversations, all things that haven't happened yet and might not happen at all, or might not go as badly as you fear. But for your ancestors, this ability was life-saving. The human who could imagine all the ways a hunting expedition might go wrong and take precautions against those possibilities was more likely to return from that hunt alive. The mother who could imagine all the dangers her child might encounter and take steps to prevent them was more likely to raise that child to adulthood. Imagination plus fear equals planning. And planning, the ability to anticipate and prepare for future dangers, became one of humanity's greatest survival advantages. But it came with a cost. Because once you can imagine future dangers, once you can feel afraid of things that haven't happened yet, you can never fully relax. There's always something to worry about. Always a possible threat lurking in the space between now and later. The night deepens. The stars wheel slowly overhead. You've been awake for hours now, maintaining this exhausting vigilance. Your turn on watch is ending soon. Someone else will take over, will shoulder the burden of staying alert while you try to find a few hours of sleep. But here's the thing about sleep when you're a vulnerable primate on the African savanna. It's not like modern sleep. It's not 8 hours of deep, restorative unconsciousness. It's fragmented, light, easily interrupted. You sleep in cycles, never dropping too deep, always ready to surface at the first sign of trouble. This sleep pattern persists in humans today. You still cycle through stages of sleep, spending most of the night in lighter stages, where you can wake quickly if needed. You still have periods of REM sleep where your brain is highly active, possibly running through simulations of threats and responses. You still wake multiple times each night, even if you don't remember it, your brain briefly checking that everything is still safe before allowing you to drift back under. This isn't insomnia. This is the normal human sleep pattern, evolved for a world where sleeping too deeply could mean never waking up. Your ancestors couldn't afford the luxury of profound unconsciousness. They had to stay ready. Even in sleep, some part of the mind remained on guard. So when you wake at 3 a.m. for no apparent reason, heart beating slightly faster, scanning the darkness of your bedroom for threats that aren't there, you're experiencing an ancient protocol, a safety check that your ancestors performed dozens of times every night, making sure the fire still burned, the group was still intact. Nothing dangerous had moved into proximity while they slept. It's not dysfunctional, it's deeply functional. just designed for a world that doesn't exist anymore. As you're lying there tonight, perhaps you can make peace with it. Not fight it, not judge yourself for feeling it. Just acknowledge it as what it is. The echo of every night your ancestors survived because they stayed afraid, because they paid attention, because they understood that the price of safety was eternal vigilance. The dark was dangerous, your body remembers. And that memory, encoded in every cell, whispered in every anxious thought, manifested in every moment of seemingly irrational fear, that memory is the reason you exist at all. So maybe, just for tonight, you can thank it. Thank the fear for keeping your genetic line alive long enough to produce you. And then, perhaps, you can rest. Because whatever dangers your fear is warning you about, they're not here. Not anymore. Not tonight. The long African night is over. The predators are gone. The fire still burns, but now it's just a metaphor. You're safe. Your ancestors bought that safety with 200,000 years of vigilance. And fear, that ancient inheritance, that tireless guardian, can rest now. At least until tomorrow night, when it will wake again and resume its watch, and remind you once more that you come from a long line of survivors who understood something fundamental. Fear is not the opposite of courage. It's the foundation of survival. But we're not done yet. We've only just begun to explore where this feeling comes from. Because fear isn't one thing. It's many things. And in the next part of our journey, we're going to walk through the specific moments in human evolution when different types of fear were born. When being afraid meant the difference between survival and extinction. When your ancestors learned exactly what to fear, and why, and how much. So settle in, let your breathing slow. The story of your fear is just beginning, and it's stranger, older, and more important than you ever imagined. Now let's go deeper, because fear isn't a single thing. It's not one unified response that your ancestors developed and then passed down unchanged through the millennia. Fear is a toolkit, a collection of specialized responses that emerged at different times, in response to different pressures, solving different survival problems. And here's what's fascinating. You can still feel these different fears operating independently in your own nervous system. The sudden jolt when something moves in your peripheral vision, that's different from the creeping dread you feel walking alone at night. The spike of panic when you lose your footing, that's different from the slow-building anxiety before a social confrontation. Different fears, different origins, different purposes. So let's walk through them. Let's trace each major type of fear back to the specific moment in evolutionary time when your ancestors learned to be afraid of something new. When a threat became common enough, dangerous enough that natural selection began favoring those who could recognize and avoid it. And let's start with the oldest fear, the deepest fear, the one that was already ancient when humans became human, the fear of falling. Picture yourself as a primate 60 million years ago. Not human, not even ape, but something earlier, something smaller. You live in trees. You've lived in trees for your entire evolutionary history. Your ancestors have been climbing, leaping, grasping branches for millions of years. And here's the thing about living in trees, gravity never stops being a threat. One missed grip, one moment of inattention, one rotten branch that breaks under your weight, and you fall. And falling from the canopy from 50 or 100 feet up is usually fatal. So the primates who survived, who left descendants, they were the ones who developed an intense, immediate, overwhelming response to the sensation of falling. Not a response that required thought or evaluation, something faster than thought, something that could fire in the milliseconds between losing your grip and hitting the ground. This is why you startle so dramatically when you lose your balance. Why that moment of free fall, even just an inch or two, triggers such a disproportionate surge of adrenaline. Your body isn't responding to your current situation, where a minor stumble means nothing. It's responding to an ancient equation where losing your balance meant death. You still have this fear. It's hardwired so deep that human infants, who've never climbed a tree or experienced a dangerous fall, will react with the distress when placed on a surface that appears to drop away beneath them. The visual cliff experiment proves this. Babies too young to have learned about falling through experience still refuse to crawl over what looks like a drop-off, even when it's just a pattern beneath clear glass. This fear is older than humanity, older than anything recognizably human. It's primate heritage, mammal heritage, the accumulated wisdom of millions of ancestors who learned the hard way that losing contact with solid ground is an emergency that requires immediate total response. And it never went away. Even after your ancestors climbed down from the trees, even after they spent millions of years walking upright on the solid ground, the fear of falling remained. Because it still served a purpose. A fall from standing height can break bones. A fall while running can be fatal if predators are nearby. A fall from a cliff, rare but possible, is still deadly. So you inherited it, this ancient, powerful, automatic fear response. And now it fires in situations your ancestors never imagined. Climbing a ladder triggers it. Standing near the edge of a high building triggers it. Even watching someone else lose their balance on a screen can trigger a sympathetic response. Your own body tensing, your own nervous system firing as if you were the one falling. This is what it means to carry evolutionary baggage. Responses that were perfectly calibrated to ancient threats, still active, still sensitive, sometimes overly so, in a world where the threats have changed beyond recognition. But let's move forward in time. Let's come to the moment when your ancestors were no longer primarily tree dwellers, but weren't yet the dominant species of the African plains. A vulnerable moment, a dangerous transition. Somewhere between 6 and 2 million years ago, your ancestors were caught between worlds. They'd come down from the trees, or been forced out as forests shrank during periods of climate change. But they weren't yet equipped to thrive on open ground. They were slow compared to the grazers, weak compared to the predators, conspicuous compared to the borrowers, and they were delicious. Soft flesh, no protective armour, no venomous bite, no noxious spray, just bipedal apes wandering around in an environment filled with things that ate apes. This is when a new fear became essential, the fear of being hunted. Now, all animals have predator avoidance responses. Mice freeze when they smell cat. Gazelles run when they see movement. But what emerged in early humans was something different. Something more complex, the ability to understand that you are prey, to model in your mind how a predator thinks, how it hunts, what it looks for. This required a cognitive leap. You had to be able to imagine being the predator, looking at yourself through predator eyes. What would make you interesting to a leopard? What behaviours would mark you as vulnerable? What situations would present a hunting opportunity? This kind of perspective taking, this theory of mind applied to predators, it created a new type of fear. Not the blind panic of the hunted, but strategic fear. Informed fear. The fear that makes you think like your enemy so you can stay one step ahead. And this changed everything. Because once humans could think like predators, they could predict predator behaviour. They could avoid places where ambush was likely. They could recognise the signs of stalking before the attack came. They could organise their camps and their movements to minimise vulnerability. But this same capacity, this ability to imagine yourself through a predator's eyes, it had a dark side. It meant you could never quite stop thinking about being hunted. Even when no predator was near, even when you were surrounded by your group in daylight, some part of your mind was always running the simulation, always imagining how an attack might unfold, always feeling a low-level anxiety that came from understanding your own vulnerability. This is still with you. When you walk alone at night and feel like someone is watching you, when you hear footsteps behind you and your heart rate spikes, when you feel the urge to look over your shoulder for no clear reason, you're experiencing the fear of being hunted. The fear that comes from understanding at a deep level that you could be prey. Modern humans rarely face actual predators, but your nervous system doesn't know that. It's still running the ancient software, still kicking for the threats, still modelling how an attack might happen. And in the absence of actual predators, it sometimes assigns that predator role to other humans, the stranger in the parking garage, the figure in the distance who seems to be following the same path as you, the sound of movement in your house at night. This is why horror movies work, why stories about serial killers or home invaders tap into such visceral fear. They're not teaching you to be afraid, they're activating a fear that's already there, that's been there for millions of years. The fear of being selected, stalked, hunted by something intelligent enough to plan, patient enough to wait, powerful enough to kill when the moment comes. Let's stay in this dangerous transition period a bit longer, because something else was happening to your ancestors during these millions of years on the African plains, something that would create one of the most powerful and persistent fear. And human psychology. They were learning about isolation. In the trees, in the forest, solitude was relatively safe. You could climb, hide in foliage, escape to branches too thin for predators to follow. But on the open plains, being alone was a death sentence. Every predator evolved to hunt on the savanna knew this instinctively. They targeted the isolated, the separated, the individual who'd wandered too far from the group. Lions would watch herds for hours, waiting for one animal to stray just far enough from the others. Hyenas would test the edges of groups, looking for the weak or the solitary. Your ancestors learned this lesson over and over, written in the bones of those who didn't stay close enough. And slowly, generation by generation, natural selection favoured those who felt an intense discomfort when separated from the group, those who experienced isolation not as freedom but as terror. This wasn't conscious knowledge. It was deeper than that. It was a feeling, a creeping anxiety that grew stronger the farther you got from familiar faces. A magnetic pull back toward the group that became overwhelming when you'd gone too far. And this created one of the most paradoxical aspects of human nature. We're intensely social not primarily because we enjoy company, though we do, but because our ancestors who didn't crave proximity were removed from the gene pool by predators who specialized in picking off the isolated. The fear of being alone, of social isolation, is not metaphorical, it's not psychological softness or emotional neediness, it's the same survival fear as the fear of darkness or falling or being hunted. Because for millions of years, being alone meant you were about to die. Think about that for a moment. Your ancestors rarely experienced true solitude. From birth to death, they were surrounded by familiar people. The group was constant, present, necessary. Being alone didn't happen except by accident or as punishment or in the moments before death. So when you feel anxious being alone, when you crave company, even when you rationally know you're safe, when social isolation causes you genuine psychological distress, you're not weak. You're experiencing an ancient equation where solitude equals danger equals death. This fear persists with remarkable strength. Studies of solitary confinement show it can cause psychological damage within days. The lack of social contact doesn't just make people uncomfortable, it breaks them, because humans are wired at the deepest level to exist in groups. Our brains literally don't function properly in extended isolation. And in your modern life, this ancient fear manifests in countless ways. The anxiety you feel when your phone dies and you're cut off from communication. The dread of eating alone in a restaurant. The discomfort of being the only person awake in a house at night. The fear of social rejection, which can feel as threatening as physical danger because to your ancient brain, social rejection was physical danger. Your ancestors who got kicked out of the group, who failed to maintain social bonds, who became isolated, they didn't leave descendants. Natural selection saw to that. So you inherited a deep, powerful fear of anything that threatens your social connections. Now let's move forward again. Let's come to a period when your ancestors were becoming recognizably human. When they had fire, language, tools, culture, when they'd figured out how to survive and even thrive in a dangerous world. But with these advances came new problems, new sources of fear. Because once you have language, once you have culture, once you have knowledge that can be passed down through generations, you have something new to lose. Not just your life, but your reputation. your status, your place in the social order. This is when a uniquely human fear emerged, the fear of social judgment. Your ancestors lived in groups of 30 to 150 people, small enough that everyone knew everyone else, small enough that your reputation, built over years of interactions, determined how others treated you, whether they shared food with you, whether they helped you when you needed it, whether they trusted you with their children or their tools or their secrets. And here's what made this so powerful. Unlike the fear of predators, which could be satisfied by staying safe for another night, the fear of social judgment never rested. Every interaction was an opportunity to build or damage your reputation. Every choice was witnessed. Every mistake was remembered. The humans who didn't care what others thought of them, who couldn't feel the weight of social disapproval, who lacked the fear of judgment, they had a serious problem. Because in a small group where survival depended on cooperation, being disliked or distrusted was almost as dangerous as being hunted. If you gained a reputation for selfishness, people stopped sharing with you. If you were known as unreliable, people stopped depending on you. If you were seen as dangerous or unstable, people actively avoided you. And in all of these scenarios, your survival prospects plummeted. So natural selection favoured those who felt intense anxiety about how others perceived them. Those who lay awake at night replaying social interactions, wondering if they'd said the wrong thing, worrying about how they'd been judged. Those who felt a knot in their stomach before social encounters all, and relief or distress after them depending on how things went. This fear of judgment, it's not modern insecurity. It's not a product of social media or competitive culture. It's ancient. It's been part of human psychology for at least 50,000 years, probably longer, and it's still with you. That feeling when you walk into a room and everyone looks at you. That replay of conversations in your mind, analysing what you said, how it was received, what others might think. That anxiety before presentations or performances, or any situation where you'll be evaluated. That's not weakness. That's an ancient alarm system designed to help you navigate a social world where reputation meant survival. But here's where it gets tricky, because this fear, like all ancient fears, is calibrated to a world that doesn't exist anymore. In a group of 50 people where you'd interact with the same individuals every day for your entire life, reputation mattered immensely. Every social mistake accumulated. Every success built on previous successes. The stakes were real and permanent. In the modern world, you encounter hundreds or thousands of people, most of whom you'll never see again. The barista who saw you spill your coffee doesn't matter. The stranger on the bus who overheard your awkward phone conversation will forget about it in minutes. The people who witnessed your embarrassment at the party don't think about it as much as you do. But your fear doesn't know that. It's still operating as if every social interaction matters permanently, as if every judgment could affect your survival, as if reputation in a group of strangers has the same stakes as reputation in a small tribe, where exile meant death. So you suffer. You feel social anxiety that's disproportionate to actual risk. You fear judgment that, even if it occurs, will have minimal impact on your life. You carry the weight of a reputation management system designed for a world where everyone knew everyone and nothing was forgotten. Let's pause here for a moment. Let's acknowledge what we've covered. The fear of falling inherited from primate ancestors who lived in trees. The fear of being hunted, developed when humans were prey on the African plains. The fear of isolation, born from millions of years when the group was the only safety. The fear of social judgment, emerging when reputation determined survival in small permanent communities. 4 different fears, 4 different origins, 4 different evolutionary pressures, and all of them still active in you, still firing, still shaping your experience of the world, even though the threats they evolved to protect against have mostly vanished. But we're not done, because there's another fear we need to explore, one that's particularly relevant as you're lying there in the dark trying to sleep, perhaps feeling it right now without quite naming it. The fear of the unknown. This one is subtle. It doesn't announce itself with a clear stimulus the way falling or being hunted does. It's more of a background hum, a general unease when facing situations you don't understand or can't predict. And it evolved for a very good reason. In your ancestors' world, the unknown was statistically dangerous. New territories might contain new predators, unfamiliar plants might be poisonous, strange noises might signal threats. Unusual situations often meant something had changed, and change in a marginal environment usually meant increased risk. So the humans who approached novelty with caution, who felt anxious when facing the unknown, who preferred the familiar even when the familiar wasn't optimal, they survived. They passed on genes for neophobia, the fear of new things, for uncertainty avoidance, the preference for predictable situations over unpredictable ones, for the tendency to stick with what works rather than experiment with what might work better but might also kill you. This is why humans are simultaneously innovative and deeply conservative. We can be convinced to try new things, but it takes effort, persuasion, proof. Our default setting is caution, suspicion, a low-level anxiety when facing anything we haven't encountered before. And this fear interacts with all the others we've discussed. The unknown might contain predators, so fear of being hunted activates. The unknown might separate you from the group, so fear of isolation activates. The unknown might cause you to make mistakes that damage your reputation, so fear of judgment activates. The fear of the unknown is a multiplier, an amplifier of other fears. It's the background anxiety that colours new situations, making them feel more threatening than they objectively are. And it's particularly active at night, because night, for your ancestors, was when the unknown became most dangerous. Things moved in darkness that didn't move in daylight. Sounds came from sources you couldn't identify. The familiar landscape became alien, full of potential threats that couldn't be assessed or avoided until they were too close. So if you're lying there right now feeling a vague unease, a sense that something isn't quite right, even though you can't identify anything specific, you're experiencing the fear of the unknown. Your brain is running a background check on your environment. And in the darkness, with limited sensory information, it can't quite confirm that everything is safe. This is normal. This is adaptive in the context it evolved for. The problem is, it rarely turns off completely. Even in safe, familiar environments, even when logic says there's nothing to fear, this background anxiety persists. Because your brain's job isn't to be logical, it's to keep you alive. And in the calculus of survival, false alarms are cheap. Missing a real threat is fatal, so your brain errs on the side of caution and maintains a baseline level of anxiety about the unknown, about uncertainty, about anything it can't fully predict or control. And you experience this as generalized anxiety, as worry, as a feeling that something bad might happen, even though you can't say what or when or why. Now here's something important to understand as we walk through these different fears. They don't just add up. They interact. They amplify each other. One fear can trigger another, creating cascades of anxiety that seem disproportionate to any single stimulus. Think about walking alone at night in an unfamiliar place. The fear of being hunted activates because you're alone and vulnerable. The fear of isolation activates because you're separated from familiar people and places. The fear of the unknown activates because the environment is unfamiliar. And all three fears feed into each other, creating a state of high alert that feels almost overwhelming, even though no specific threat has materialized. This is why anxiety can feel so confusing. You're responding not to one thing but to multiple ancient fear systems firing simultaneously, each one amplifying the others, creating a state of distress that your conscious mind struggles to explain or justify. Your ancestors needed this. They needed fear systems that could cascade, that could rapidly escalate from low-level caution to high-level emergency response, because threats in their world often escalated quickly. The rustle in the grass might be wind, or it might be a predator in the final moments before an attack. Better to overreact to wind 1,000 times than to underreact to a predator once. But in your world, where most threats unfold slowly and can be addressed through planning rather than immediate action, these cascading fear responses are often counterproductive. They create anxiety that impairs rather than enhances your ability to respond. They exhaust you without protecting you. They keep you awake at night, preparing for dangers that will never come. And yet you can't turn them off, because they're not conscious choices. They're automatic responses, running on neural pathways carved over the millions of years, triggered by situations that superficially resemble the ancient dangers, even when the actual threat level is minimal or absent. Let's talk about one more fear before we move on. One that might be particularly relevant as you're listening to this: trying to sleep. Perhaps struggling with the irony that a video about fear might be making you more aware of your own anxiety, the fear of your own mind. This is the most recent fear, evolutionarily speaking, and in some ways the most uniquely human, because it requires a level of self-awareness that may not exist in other species. Once humans developed language, once they could think about their own thinking, once they became conscious of their consciousness, a new problem emerged. The realization that your mind could betray you, that your thoughts and feelings and perceptions weren't always reliable, that the voice in your head could lie to you or mislead you or trap you in loops of worry that serve no purpose. This meta-fear, this fear of fear itself, this anxiety about anxiety, it's a relatively modern development in evolutionary terms, but it's become incredibly powerful, because unlike external threats that you can fight or flee, your own mind is inescapable. You can't run from your thoughts, you can't hide from your feelings, they're always there. And when they turn threatening, when fear itself becomes something you're afraid of, you're trapped. This is what anxiety disorders are at their core. Not just fear of external threats, but fear of your own fear response. Worry about worry. Panic about panic. The fear system turning on itself, creating a feedback loop that escalates without any external trigger. And here's the cruelest part. This only happens because you're smart enough to be aware of your fear. Animals that lack self-awareness, they feel fear when threatened and calm when safe. They don't worry about whether they'll feel afraid later. They don't analyze their fear responses and judge themselves for having them. They just experience fear as it arises and let it pass when the threat disappears. But you, with your sophisticated human consciousness, you can think about your fear, anticipate it, remember it, analyze it, judge it, and in doing so you can amplify it far beyond what the original stimulus warranted. This is why sometimes, lying in bed at night, you can feel anxious about feeling anxious, worried about whether you'll be able to sleep, afraid that your fear will keep you awake. It's a uniquely human trap, created by the same consciousness that allowed humans to survive and thrive and eventually dominate the planet. So here you are, carrying all of these fears, ancient and modern, external and internal, rational and irrational, fear of falling from primate ancestors, fear of predators from millions of years on dangerous plains, fear of isolation from social species evolution, fear of judgment from life in small groups, fear of the unknown from the constant threat of environmental change, and fear of your own mental states from the recent emergence of self-aware consciousness. No wonder you sometimes feel anxious for no clear reason. No wonder the feeling of fear can seem disproportionate to any identifiable threat. You're not experiencing one fear. You're experiencing the accumulated weight of millions of years of evolutionary pressure. All of it still active. All of it still trying to protect you from dangers that mostly don't exist anymore. But here's what you need to understand, what you need to really absorb as you're lying there in the dark feeling whatever version of fear has decided to visit you tonight. None of this is your fault. None of it represents weakness or dysfunction or failure. You're not anxious because you're broken. You're anxious because you're human. And being human means carrying this ancient inheritance of fear, this toolkit of alarm systems that kept your ancestors alive, but now sometimes fire when they don't need to. The fear you feel is not random, it's not meaningless. It's a message from your past, from every ancestor who survived long enough to pass their genes forward to you. They survived because they were afraid, because they paid attention to their fear, because they took it seriously. You inherited that tendency. that sensitivity, that capacity for anxiety and worry and vigilance, and in their world, in the context it evolved for, it was the most valuable gift they could give you. In your world, it sometimes feels like a curse, but maybe, just maybe, understanding where it comes from, why it exists, what it's trying to do, maybe that understanding can help you make peace with it, not eliminate it. You can't eliminate millions of years of evolution, but perhaps you can stop fighting it, stop judging yourself for feeling it, stop adding the fear of fear on top of all the other fears you're already carrying. Perhaps you can acknowledge it, thank it even. Thank it for keeping your ancestors alive, for ensuring that their genetic line, that unbroken chain stretching back millions of years, survived long enough to produce you. And then perhaps you can let it rest, just for tonight, because whatever it's warning you about, whatever ancient danger it's preparing you for, it's not here. The predators are gone. The dark is safe. You're not falling. You're not isolated. You're not being judged. The unknown isn't dangerous tonight. You're just lying in bed, listening to a voice in the dark, learning about fear. And that's safe. That's okay. That's exactly where you should be. So breathe. Let your muscles relax. Let the vigilance soften. Your fear has served its purpose. It's kept watch. It's scanned for threats. It's found none. You can rest now. Your ancestors brought you this safety, earned it through millions of years of being appropriately afraid at appropriate times. Tonight is not one of those times. Tonight, fear can sleep, and so can you. So here's where it gets really interesting, and perhaps really relevant to you lying there tonight, feeling whatever version of anxiety has decided to keep you company. We've traced these fears back to their origins. We understand why they exist, what they protected against, how they kept your ancestors alive. But that was then. That was the Pleistocene, the African savanna, the dangerous world where these fears made perfect sense. Now let's talk about what happens when you take fear responses calibrated for that world and drop them into modern life. When ancient alarms start firing in response to contemporary situations, when your Pleistocene brain tries to navigate a world it was never designed for, this is where fear becomes fascinating and confusing, and sometimes almost comical in how poorly matched it is to actual threats. Let's start with something simple, something that might have happened to you today. You're in a meeting at work, or on a video call, or in a classroom, somewhere where people are looking at you, waiting for you to speak, and you feel it, that tightness in your chest, that slight tremor in your voice, that heat rising in your face, your heart beating faster, your palms sweating. This is fear. Full activation of your fear response. The same physiological cascade that your ancestors experienced when facing a leopard. Increased heart rate to pump blood to muscles for fighting or fleeing. Sweating to cool your body during physical exertion. Heightened alertness to track threats. Stress hormones flooding your system to sharpen reactions. But you're not facing a leopard. You're giving a presentation, or answering a question, or introducing yourself to a group. And yet your body is responding as if your life is in danger. Why? Because to your ancient brain it is. Remember the fear of social judgment we discussed earlier? The one that evolved when reputation in small groups determined survival? That fear doesn't distinguish between ancient social threats and modern ones. It just knows that you're being evaluated by the group, and evaluation is dangerous. In your ancestors' world, failing publicly, making a mistake in front of the tribe, demonstrating incompetence or unreliability, these things had real consequences. You might lose status, which meant losing access to resources, mates, protection. In extreme cases, you might be ostracized, which was effectively a death sentence. So your body learned to treat social evaluation as an emergency, to mobilize all available resources to help you perform well, to avoid mistakes, to make a good impression. The fear response, with all its physical symptoms, was meant to help you. But here's the problem. The physical symptoms that help you fight or flee, they don't help you think. They don't help you speak clearly or remember what you wanted to say or present information in an organized way. The increased heart rate that would power your muscles to run from danger just makes your voice shake. The alertness that would help you track a predator just makes you hyper-aware of every person looking at you. The stress hormones that would sharpen your reflexes just make your mind feel scattered and unfocused. Your fear response is trying to save you from a social threat by preparing you for physical action. But modern social threats require mental action, clear thinking, calm articulation, emotional regulation, all the things that fear actively impairs. This is the mismatch. The ancient fear response, perfectly adapted for ancient threats, actively counterproductive for modern ones. And it gets worse. Because once the fear response activates, once you feel those physical symptoms, your conscious mind notices them. And often it misinterprets them. It thinks, I'm feeling afraid, that must mean there's real danger here, which increases the fear, which intensifies the symptoms, which convinces you there's even more danger. This is the feedback loop we talked about earlier. The fear of fear, your ancient alarm system firing, your modern consciousness noticing and amplifying, creating a cascade that can turn a mildly stressful situation into a full panic attack. And through it all, the actual level of danger is minimal. You're not going to die if your presentation goes poorly. You're not going to be ostracized from society if you stumble over your words. The stakes are real, but not existential. But your body doesn't know that. It's responding to ancient stakes, ancient consequences, ancient dangers that don't exist in this modern situation. Let's look at another scenario. Another mismatch between ancient fear and modern reality. You're lying in bed trying to sleep. Tomorrow you have something important. A job interview, a medical appointment, a difficult conversation, and you can't stop thinking about it. Running through scenarios, imagining what might go wrong, feeling your anxiety build as you mentally rehearse disaster after disaster. This is anticipatory anxiety, and it's a direct descendant of the fear of the unknown we discussed earlier. Your ancestors who could imagine future dangers and prepare for them had a survival advantage. Planning ahead, running mental simulations, considering what might go wrong and how to prevent it. This was adaptive. But it was adaptive when the dangers were immediate and concrete. When you needed to plan tomorrow's hunt or figure out how to cross a dangerous river or decide whether to approach an unfamiliar water source. These were problems where mental simulation led to better planning, which led to better outcomes. Your modern worries don't work this way. You're not planning concrete actions to address specific threats. You're just worrying, imagining bad outcomes without developing strategies to prevent them, running the same anxious thoughts in loops without arriving at solutions. And the more you worry, the more activated your stress response becomes. The more activated your stress response, the harder it is to think clearly, or sleep, or do any of the things that would actually help you perform well tomorrow. So the worrying itself creates the performance impairment you're worried about. Your fear of failing makes you more likely to fail. This is another mismatch. The capacity for anticipatory fear was useful when it led to concrete preparation. But in modern life, anticipatory fear often just leads to rumination, unproductive worry that exhausts you without protecting you. Your ancient brain doesn't understand this distinction. It thinks it's helping by keeping you alert to possible threats. It thinks running through worst-case scenarios is useful preparation. It doesn't realize that in your modern context, this kind of worry is more likely to harm than help. Let's shift contexts. Let's talk about something that might seem less directly fear-related, but is actually deeply connected to your ancient fear responses. You're scrolling through social media, you see someone's vacation photos, their career success, their happy relationship, their perfect meal, their clean house, their well-behaved children. And you feel something. Not quite fear, but something in that family. A sense of inadequacy. A worry that you're falling behind. An anxiety about not measuring up. This is social comparison anxiety. And it's rooted in the fear of social judgment we discussed earlier. Because in your ancestors' world, relative status mattered. Being at the bottom of the social hierarchy meant fewer resources, fewer mating opportunities, less protection. There was real adaptive value in constantly assessing where you stood relative to others and feeling motivated to improve your position. But social comparison in a small tribe is nothing like social comparison on the internet. In a tribe of 50 people, you knew everyone. You could accurately assess your relative standing. You could identify specific skills to develop or relationships to strengthen. Social comparison provided useful information that could guide adaptive behavior. On social media, you're comparing yourself to hundreds or thousands of people, most of whom you don't know, many of whom are presenting carefully curated versions of their lives designed to look better than reality. The comparison is meaningless. It provides no useful information. It doesn't guide adaptive behavior because there's no way to actually compete with an idealized version of someone's life that exists only on a screen. But your ancient brain doesn't know that. It sees evidence that others are doing better than you, and it activates the same fear response that would have motivated your ancestors to improve their social standing. You feel anxious, inadequate, stressed. Your cortisol levels rise. Your mood drops. You might feel compelled to present your own idealized version of life to compete, which increases anxiety for everyone involved. This is a mismatch between an adaptive fear response and a completely artificial situation that your brain isn't equipped to handle. Social comparison anxiety is trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist in the form it thinks it does. And the more connected we become digitally, the worse this mismatch gets. Your brain evolved to track social standing among a small number of people you actually knew. Now it's trying to process social information from thousands of people, and it's overwhelmed. The fear response that was meant to motivate useful social striving just creates chronic anxiety and depression. Now let's talk about something that affects you right now, in this moment, as you're trying to sleep. The darkness, the silence, the isolation of nighttime, and the fear that sometimes accompanies it. We talked earlier about how darkness was genuinely dangerous for your ancestors, how the night was when predators hunted, how fire provided only limited protection, how vigilance was necessary for survival. But you're not on the African savannah. You're in a home with locked doors, in a neighborhood with streetlights, in a society with police and hospitals and all the infrastructure of modern safety. The objective danger level of night in your environment is close to zero, and yet some part of you still feels it. That slight unease when you turn off the lights, that awareness of sounds you didn't notice during the day, that subtle anxiety that something could go wrong in the darkness. This is ancient fear activating in response to ancient cues. Your brain has been monitoring the light levels. It noticed when the sun went down. It knows it's night, and night means danger, according to millions of years of evolutionary programming. The fact that night doesn't actually mean danger anymore, that's too recent a development for evolution to have caught up. Your brain is still running on Pleistocene software, still treating darkness as a threat category, still maintaining higher vigilance levels at night, even though the threats that darkness concealed are long gone. And this creates a particularly frustrating mismatch. You need to sleep. Sleep is when your body and brain recover, consolidate memories, regulate emotions, restore energy for tomorrow. But the fear response that activates at night makes sleep harder. The vigilance that kept your ancestors alive prevents you from getting the rest you need. Your body is trying to protect you by staying alert at night, but in doing so it's actually harming you by preventing the sleep that's essential for your health. The mismatch between ancient danger and modern safety creates a situation where your protective mechanisms work against your well-being. And it gets even more complex when you consider what we call safety behaviors. These are the things you do to manage your fear. Checking that doors are locked, keeping a light on, making sure your phone is charged and nearby, avoiding certain situations that trigger anxiety. These behaviors might reduce your fear in the moment, but they also reinforce the idea that there's something to be afraid of. Your ancient brain thinks, we're doing these safety behaviors because there's danger. If we stop doing them, the danger will get us. So the behaviors meant to reduce fear actually maintain it. This is another mismatch. In your ancestors' world, safety behaviours worked. Keeping the fire going actually did protect against predators. Staying with the group actually did reduce danger. But in modern life, many safety behaviours are solving problems that don't exist. And in doing so, they prevent you from learning that you're actually safe. Let's shift one more time. Let's talk about a fear that's become particularly acute in modern life, even though its roots are ancient. The fear of missing out, FOMO as it's commonly known, that anxiety you feel when you see others doing things you're not doing, when you stay home while friends go out, when you decline an invitation because you're tired but then worry you've damaged your social connections. This fear connects to the ancient fear of isolation we discussed earlier. In small tribal groups, missing social gatherings could genuinely threaten your social standing. If you weren't present when important decisions were made, when alliances were formed, when resources were distributed, you could find yourself on the outside, and being on the outside of a small group could mean life or death. So your ancestors who felt anxious about missing social opportunities, who pushed themselves to participate even when tired or unwell, who prioritized social connection over personal comfort, they maintained better social integration, they stayed connected, they survived. But in modern life, this fear is wildly out of proportion to actual risk. Missing one party doesn't threaten your social standing. Staying home for a night doesn't mean social exile. You have many relationships, many social circles, many opportunities to connect. One missed event means almost nothing in the long term. But your brain doesn't see it that way. Your brain sees any social opportunity you miss as a potential threat to your social integration. It activates anxiety to motivate you to participate, to stay connected, to not let relationships lapse. And in our hyper-connected digital age, where you can see what everyone is doing all the time, this anxiety becomes chronic. Every time you scroll through social media and see people together without you, your ancient fear of social exclusion activates. Never mind that you couldn't physically attend every gathering you see online. Never mind that many of these people aren't even in your actual social circle. Your brain just knows that social things are happening without you, and in its ancient logic, that's dangerous. This creates exhaustion, constant low-level anxiety about whether you're staying sufficiently connected, pressure to say yes to everything, guilt when you prioritize rest or solitude, and all of it driven by a fear response designed for a world where your survival depended on a small group of people you lived with every day. So here you are, carrying all of these ancient fears into a modern world that triggers them constantly in ways they were never designed to handle. Public speaking activates fears of social judgment calibrated for tribal life. Worry about the future activates anticipatory anxiety designed for immediate physical threats. Social media activates comparison anxiety designed for small group competition. Darkness activates vigilance designed for a world with actual nocturnal predators. FOMO activates fear of social exclusion designed for situations where exclusion was genuinely life-threatening. Every day, dozens of times, your ancient alarm systems fire in response to modern situations, and every time they fire, you feel the physiological cascade of fear. The racing heart, the tight chest, the worried thoughts, the urge to do something, anything to make the fear stop. But here's what makes this particularly difficult. You can't just turn off these fears. You can't uninstall the ancient software. It's not a conscious choice you're making. These are automatic responses, running on neural pathways carved over millions of years, triggered by situations that pattern match to ancient dangers even when they're not actually dangerous. And worse, the fear often makes the situation worse. The social anxiety that's meant to help you perform well in social situations actually impairs your social performance. The anticipatory anxiety that's meant to help you prepare for challenges actually reduces your ability to handle them. The vigilance that's meant to protect you at night actually prevents the sleep you need to be healthy. This is the cruel irony of ancient fear in modern life. The protective mechanisms are still trying to protect you, but the context has changed so much that they often end up causing the very problems they're trying to prevent. So what do you do with this? How do you live with a Pleistocene brain in a modern world? First, you understand, you recognize these fears for what they are. ancient alarms, still functional, still trying to protect you, but often triggered by false positives. When you feel anxious, you can ask yourself, is this ancient fear or modern danger? Is my body preparing me for something that actually requires this level of response? Often the answer is no. Your elevated heart rate before a presentation isn't proportionate to the actual risk. Your anxiety about social media comparison isn't based on real threats to your survival. Your nighttime vigilance isn't protecting you against dangers that actually exist. Understanding this doesn't make the fear go away, but it can change your relationship with it. Instead of taking the fear at face value, instead of believing that the intensity of the fear reflects the intensity of the danger, you can recognize it as a mismatch, your alarm system doing its job, but in a context it wasn't designed for. Second, you can practice not reinforcing the false alarms. When your fear response fires in a situation that's not actually dangerous, you can notice it, acknowledge it, and then not act as if you're in danger. You can let your body go through its fear response while your behavior communicates safety. This is hard. Everything in you wants to escape the uncomfortable feeling. But when you consistently expose yourself to situations that trigger fear while demonstrating through your behavior that they're actually safe, your brain slowly begins to recalibrate. The fear response becomes less intense. The triggers become less activating. This is the principle behind exposure therapy. It works because it teaches your ancient brain that modern situations don't actually require ancient fear responses. But it takes time, lots of repetition, consistent practice of staying in situations that feel threatening but actually aren't. Third, you can give yourself permission to feel afraid without judging yourself for it. This is crucial because the fear of fear, the meta-anxiety about being anxious, that's often worse than the original fear. When you feel afraid and then criticize yourself for it, when you think, I shouldn't feel this way, or what's wrong with me for being so anxious, you're adding a layer of suffering on top of the fear itself. But if you can recognize that fear is just your evolutionary inheritance doing its job, if you can acknowledge it without judgment, if you can say, of course I feel afraid, I come from a long line of people who survived because they felt afraid in situations like this, then the fear becomes more manageable. It's still uncomfortable, but it's not also shameful or evidence that something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. You're just a human carrying human fears, living in a world that activates those fears in ways your ancestors never experienced. And finally, you can remember that you're not alone in this. Every person around you is carrying the same ancient fears. Everyone is dealing with the same mismatches between Pleistocene brain and modern world. The person who seems calm and confident is also feeling fear. They've just learned to function despite it. The person who seems to have it all together is also struggling with anxiety. They've just gotten good at hiding it. Your fear doesn't make you different. It makes you human. It connects you to every other person trying to navigate this strange modern world with ancient equipment. And it connects you, across vast stretches of time, to every ancestor who survived long enough to pass their genes forward to you. They survived because they were afraid. You exist because they were afraid. The fear you feel tonight, lying there in the dark, struggling with anxiety that seems disproportionate to any identifiable threat, that fear is proof that your ancestors were survivors, that they paid attention to their fear, that they took it seriously, that they lived long enough, despite being surrounded by genuine dangers, to create the long chain of inheritance that eventually produced you. So maybe you can thank it. Thank the fear for keeping your genetic line alive, for ensuring that somewhere, somehow, against incredible odds, your ancestors survived and reproduced for millions of years until you could be here, in this moment, feeling this fear, and then maybe you can let it rest. Because tonight, right now in this moment, the fear has done its job. It's checked for threats. It's scanned the environment. It's run through the scenarios. And it's found that you're safe. The predators are gone. The darkness is empty. The social judgment you fear won't actually harm you. The future you're worried about hasn't arrived yet. The isolation you feel isn't actually dangerous. You're just lying in bed in the dark, listening to a voice talk about fear. And that's safe. That's okay. That's exactly where you should be. Your ancient fears have carried you this far. They've done their job for millions of years. Tonight, they can rest, and so can you. But before we end, there's one more piece out of this story we need to explore. Because understanding where fear comes from and how it misfires in modern life, that's important. But there's something else. Something about what fear has given us, beyond survival. Something about how fear, paradoxically, might be connected to the best parts of being human. And that's where we'll go next. Not to minimize fear or dismiss it or pretend it's not difficult, but to see it in its full complexity. To understand not just what it protects us from, but what it enables us to be. Before we move to that gentler space, let's look at a few more modern fears. Because the list of ways ancient alarm systems misfire in contemporary life is longer than we've covered so far. And understanding the full scope of these mismatches might help you recognize them in your own experience. Let's talk about something relatively new in human history, the fear of technology. Or more specifically, the anxiety that comes from feeling like you can't keep up with technological change, that you don't understand how things work, that you're being left behind as the world moves forward without you. This connects to the fear of the unknown we discussed earlier. But it's amplified by the pace of change. Your ancestors faced change, certainly. Seasons changed, migrations happened, new threats emerged, but the basic framework of their world remained relatively stable across generations. The survival skills you learned as a child would still be relevant when you were old. Not anymore. The technology that seemed cutting edge when you were young is obsolete before you're old. The skills that were valuable a decade ago might be irrelevant now. The world is changing faster than any human's ability to fully comprehend, let alone master all the changes. And your ancient brain, which evolved to treat novelty with caution, which learned that unfamiliar things were often dangerous, it's overwhelmed. Every new app, every software update, every technological advance that you don't immediately understand triggers a low-level anxiety, a sense that you're falling behind, that you're becoming obsolete, that you're losing your ability to navigate the world successfully. In your ancestors' environment, this fear would have motivated you to learn, to adapt, to master new skills, and it still does to some extent. But the pace of technological change is so rapid that no amount of learning can keep you fully current. You're always playing catch-up, always feeling slightly behind, always anxious about what you don't know. This creates a chronic stress that your ancestors never experienced. The feeling that the world is moving faster than you can adapt to it. That understanding is always just out of reach. That no matter how much you learn, there's always more you should know. And the worst part is, this anxiety often prevents the very learning it's meant to motivate. When you feel overwhelmed by how much you don't know, you often avoid learning anything new. The fear of being incompetent makes you avoid situations where your incompetence might show. So you fall further behind, which increases the anxiety, which increases the avoidance. Another modern feedback loop driven by ancient fear responses that aren't calibrated for this kind of problem. Let's look at another distinctly modern fear, the anxiety of choice, of having too many options, of not knowing which path to take when confronted with overwhelming possibilities. Your ancestors rarely faced this problem. Their choices were limited by geography, by resources, by the simple constraints of survival. You lived where food and water were available. You used the materials at hand. You followed patterns established by previous generations because deviation was risky and innovation was expensive. But in modern life, especially in affluent societies, you face constant choices. What to eat, what to wear, what to study, where to live, who to date, which job to take, how to spend your time. Thousands of decisions, many with significant consequences, few with obvious correct answers. And each choice triggers fear. Because choosing one thing means not choosing others. Every path taken is dozens of paths not taken. Every decision carries the possibility of regret, of having chosen wrong, of missing out on something better. This is called decision anxiety. And it's rooted in that same fear of the unknown, combined with the fear of social judgment. Because in choosing, you're committing to a particular version of your future. You're making yourself vulnerable to judgment, both your own and others, about whether you chose wisely. Your ancestors who worried about making the right choice, who carefully evaluated options before committing, who felt anxious about decisions, they probably made better choices on average. The anxiety motivated thorough consideration. It prevented impulsive decisions that could be fatal in a resource-scarce environment. But in a world of abundant options, this same anxiety becomes paralyzing. Instead of motivating careful consideration, it leads to endless deliberation. Analysis paralysis. The fear of making the wrong choice prevents you from making any choice at all. You stay stuck, anxious, exhausting yourself with consideration while life passes you by. And even after you choose, the anxiety doesn't end. You experience what psychologists call choice-supportive bias and buyer's remorse simultaneously. Part of you tries to convince yourself you made the right choice. Another part obsesses about whether a different choice would have been better. The fear that you chose wrong, that you're missing out, that you've wasted your limited time and resources, it persists long after the decision is made. This is another mismatch. The capacity for decision anxiety was adaptive when choices were limited and consequences were immediate. But in modern life, with endless options and delayed consequences, this same capacity creates chronic stress without improving decision quality. Now, let's talk about perhaps the most existential modern fear, one that might visit you particularly at night, in quiet moments when distractions fade and you're left alone with your thoughts. The fear that you're wasting your life, that time is passing, that you're not doing enough, being enough, achieving enough, that you'll look back and realize you missed what mattered, that you'll reach the end with more regrets than satisfactions. This fear has ancient roots. The awareness of mortality, the understanding that time is finite, this has been part of human consciousness for at least 50,000 years. We know this because we find burial sites with grave goods, evidence that humans were thinking about death, preparing for it, treating it as meaningful. But the specific anxiety about wasting life, about not living up to your potential, about missing out on experiences or achievements, this is amplified in modern culture because you're constantly exposed to examples of what others are doing. You see people younger than you achieving more, people your age living differently, people older than you who seem to have figured out something you haven't. And you compare, you measure, you judge yourself against impossible standards, because you're not comparing yourself to a handful of people in your tribe. You're comparing yourself to everyone you see online, everyone portrayed in media, everyone whose success story gets amplified while their struggles remain hidden. This creates a fear that your ancestors couldn't have felt with the same intensity. They had limited exposure to how others lived. Their reference group was small. Their achievements could be measured against a finite set of possibilities within their community. But you can imagine infinite versions of yourself living infinite different lives. And no matter what you're doing, you can imagine something else you could be doing instead. Something that might be better, more meaningful, more fulfilling. The opportunity cost of every choice is visible, magnified, impossible to ignore. This fear of wasting life creates a particular kind of anxiety. It's not about specific threats or dangers. It's about meaning, purpose, the story you're telling with your finite existence. And unlike concrete fears that can be addressed with concrete actions, this fear is harder to resolve. Because there's no objective answer to whether you're living well, no clear metric for success, no way to know until it's too late whether the choices you made were the right ones. Your ancestors who worried about meaning, about legacy, about whether their lives mattered, they might have been motivated to contribute more to their communities, to take actions that would be remembered, to invest in relationships and accomplishments that would outlast their physical existence. But in modern life, this same concern can become crushing. The pressure to make every moment count, to optimize every hour, to constantly be productive, growing, achieving, the guilt when you rest, the anxiety when you simply exist without striving. the sense that time is slipping away and you're not using it well enough. This is exhausting. And paradoxically, the anxiety about wasting life can cause you to waste life. The time spent worrying about whether you're making the right choices could be spent simply living. The energy burned on anxiety about meaning could be invested in activities that actually feel meaningful. The fear itself becomes the problem. So here you are in the modern world with all of these fears, ancient fears about falling, being hunted, isolation, judgment, the unknown, modern amplifications about technology, choice, social comparison, wasting life. All of them firing, all of them demanding attention, all of them trying to protect you from dangers both real and imagined. No wonder you feel anxious sometimes. No wonder it's hard to relax. No wonder sleep can be elusive when your mind is processing all of this, running through scenarios, evaluating threats, trying to protect you from everything that could possibly go wrong. But here's what's important to remember. These fears, overwhelming as they sometimes feel, they're not infinite. They're not without limit. They operate within parameters, following rules, responding to patterns. And once you understand the rules, once you recognize the patterns, you gain a measure of control. Not control over whether you feel fear. That's mostly automatic. But control over how you respond to fear. Whether you treat it as accurate information about danger or recognize it as ancient alarm systems misfiring in modern contexts. Whether you let it dictate your behavior or acknowledge it while choosing actions based on reality rather than evolutionary memory. This is the work of being human in the modern world, learning to live with a Pleistocene brain in a contemporary context, learning which fears to listen to and which to acknowledge but not obey, learning to distinguish between genuine threats that require action and false alarms that require only patience while your nervous system recalibrates. It's not easy. It's not something you master once and then you're done. It's ongoing work, daily use, sometimes moment-to-moment work, but it's possible. And understanding where these fears come from, why they exist, what they're trying to do, that understanding is the foundation. So stay with me. Let your breathing deepen, let your muscles soften. The hardest part of the night is behind you. What comes next is gentler, more philosophical, an invitation to see your fear not as an enemy to defeat, but as an inheritance to understand. A gift, even if it's a difficult one, from everyone who came before you. So we've spent hours now exploring fear from every angle. Where it came from, what it protected against, how it misfires in modern life, how it creates suffering that seems disproportionate to actual threats. And you might be thinking, okay, I understand my fear better now, but I still don't like it. I still wish I didn't have to feel this way. And that's fair. Fear is uncomfortable. Anxiety is exhausting. The constant vigilance, the racing thoughts, the physical symptoms, none of it feels good. If you could press a button and eliminate fear from your experience, you might be tempted to press it. But here's what we haven't talked about yet. Here's the part of the story that's often missing from discussions about fear and anxiety. The paradoxical truth that fear, this inheritance you didn't ask for and can't return, has given you gifts. Real gifts. Things that make you human in the fullest sense. Things you wouldn't want to lose, even if you could. This isn't toxic positivity. This isn't pretending that anxiety is actually wonderful and you should be grateful for suffering. This is something more subtle. An acknowledgement that fear, as difficult as it is, has been intimately connected to the best parts of human experience for as long as humans have been human. Let's start with courage. You probably think of courage as the absence of fear, as something that brave people have that anxious people lack. But that's not what courage is. That's not how it works. And the people who seem fearless, who appear to move through dangerous situations without hesitation, they were not courageous. They're either foolish or they have a neurological condition that prevents normal fear responses. Real courage is not the absence of fear, it's action in the presence of fear. It's feeling afraid and doing the thing anyway. And you can only have courage if you can feel fear. The two are inseparable. Think about it. Your ancestors who felt fear but could act despite it, they survived situations that killed those who either felt no fear or were paralyzed by it. The complete absence of fear led to reckless behavior. Overwhelming fear led to paralysis. But the ability to feel fear, acknowledge it, and still take necessary action, that was the sweet spot. This is still true. The person who gives a presentation while feeling terrified is showing more courage than the person who feels no anxiety. The individual who reaches out socially despite fear of rejection is demonstrating more bravery than someone who has no fear of judgment. The parent who protects their child despite their own fear is acting with courage that would be impossible without the capacity to feel afraid. Your fear, that uncomfortable feeling you wish would go away, is the prerequisite for courage. Every time you feel afraid and act anyway, you're exercising a capacity that defines human dignity. You're proving that you're not controlled by your fear, that you can feel it and still choose your actions based on values rather than comfort. This is profound. Without fear, there is no courage. Without anxiety, there is no opportunity to demonstrate that you're more than your automatic responses. The very thing that feels like weakness, the fear that makes you feel vulnerable and exposed, it's creating the possibility for one of humanity's most valued traits. And here's what's even more interesting. The people who report the highest levels of meaning and satisfaction in their lives, they are not people who never feel fear. They're people who regularly do things that scare them, who push past their comfort zones, who face their fears and discover that they can survive the discomfort. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth or adversarial growth. The phenomenon where facing challenges, including fear and anxiety, actually strengthens you, makes you more resilient, gives you confidence that you can handle difficulty, creates a sense that your life has a depth and meaning precisely because it hasn't been easy. Your fear is giving you opportunities for this kind of growth every single day. Every time you feel anxious and do the thing anyway, you're building evidence that fear doesn't control you, that you're capable of more than your anxiety wants you to believe, that you can expand your life rather than shrinking it. Now let's talk about empathy, about your capacity to understand and connect with others' emotional experiences. The people who have never felt profound fear, who have never experienced anxiety, who move through life without the burden of worry, they often struggle to understand those who do. They can't quite grasp what it's like to feel paralyzed by panic or exhausted by vigilance or trapped by worry. Their lack of personal experience creates a gap in their capacity for empathy. But you, with your intimate knowledge of fear, with your first-hand experience of anxiety, you have a different kind of understanding. When someone else is afraid, you recognize it. When they're anxious, you get it. You don't dismiss their fear as irrational or weak because you know from the inside how powerful and real it feels. This creates connection, deep, genuine connection. Because people who are struggling with fear, they can tell when someone truly understands versus when someone is just being polite. They can feel the difference between "I'm sure it's fine" and "I know how hard this is." Your fear has taught you to be present with others' fear, to not minimize it, to not rush to fix it, to simply be there, acknowledging that yes, this is hard, yes, it makes sense that you're afraid, yes, you're not alone in feeling this way. This is a gift, not one you asked for, not one that came free. You paid for it with your own suffering, with nights like tonight when fear keeps you awake, with days when anxiety makes everything harder than it should be. But it's still a gift, the capacity to truly understand what others are going through, to connect at the level of shared vulnerability, to build relationships based on authentic recognition of struggle, rather than performance of having it all together. And this empathy extends beyond fear itself, because once you understand that your own internal experience is complex and sometimes contradictory, that you can know something intellectually while feeling something different emotionally, that you can want to do something while also being terrified of it, you become better at understanding others' complexity. You stop judging people for not just getting over things. You recognize that change is hard even when it's clearly necessary. You understand that people can be simultaneously strong and vulnerable, capable and struggling, doing their best and still falling short. Your fear has taught you to see nuance, to hold complexity, to extend grace to others because you know how much you need it extended to you. This is emotional intelligence, built not from books or training, but from lived experience of being human in all its uncomfortable messiness. Now let's talk about creativity, about the connection between anxiety and imagination. Remember when we discussed anticipatory fear, the capacity to imagine future dangers? That same capacity, that ability to mentally simulate things that haven't happened yet, it's not just about fear, it's the foundation of all human creativity. Artists, writers, inventors, innovators, they all share something in common. They can imagine things that don't exist yet. They can see possibilities that others miss. They can envision different futures and work toward making them real. And this capacity, this gift for imagination, it's built on the same neural machinery that generates anxiety. Studies have shown that people with anxiety disorders often have particularly vivid imaginations. They can generate detailed mental scenarios with ease. They were good at thinking through possibilities, considering what-ifs, exploring branching paths of potential futures. These are the same skills that drive creative work. The anxious mind that keeps you awake running through everything that could go wrong tomorrow, that's also the mind that can imagine new solutions to old problems, that can envision art that doesn't exist yet, that can write stories or compose music or design innovations. Your capacity for worry and your capacity for creativity, they're drawing from the same well. This doesn't mean anxiety makes you creative, but it does suggest that the cognitive style that predisposes you to anxiety, the tendency toward imagination and mental simulation, also predisposes you toward creative thinking. Many of history's great artists, writers, and innovators struggled with profound anxiety. Their fear didn't make them creative, but the same mind that generated fear also generated art. And there's something else. Something about the relationship between fear and meaning, between anxiety and the search for purpose. People who never question things, who never worry, who take everything at face value and feel confident about all their choices, they often don't spend much time thinking about meaning. They don't ask deep questions about purpose or value or whether they're living well. They just live, unexamined, unchallenged by doubt. But people who feel anxious, who worry, who struggle with fear, they often become philosophers by necessity. They have to think about why they're afraid, what matters to them, what they value enough to face fear for, what kind of life is worth living despite the discomfort. Your anxiety pushes you to examine your life, to question your choices, to think about what really matters versus what you're doing out of habit or social expectation or avoidance of fear. This examination, uncomfortable as it is, often leads to a more intentional, more meaningful life. The people who report the highest levels of life satisfaction, they are not people who never felt anxious about whether they were living well. They are people who asked that question, struggled with it, and eventually found answers that felt true for them. The anxiety was part of the process. The fear was the motivation to dig deeper, to not settle for surface-level existence. Your fear is asking you questions, hard questions, questions about what matters, what you want, who you are, what kind of life you're building. These questions are uncomfortable, but they're also the questions that lead to growth, change, depth, meaning. Let's shift now to something more recent, something from contemporary psychology and neuroscience that might help you understand your fear in a new way. Researchers have discovered something fascinating about people who've experienced significant anxiety or fear and worked through it. Their brains actually change. Not in the sense of damage, but in the sense of increased capacity. The regions involved in emotion regulation, in executive function, in deliberate choice, they show increased activity and connectivity after someone has successfully navigated fear. It's as if the brain, having been challenged by intense emotion, builds new infrastructure to handle it better next time. This is called stress-induced neural plasticity, and it suggests that fear, When you work with it rather than being overwhelmed by it, actually makes your brain more capable, stronger, more resilient. Think of it like exercise. When you lift weights, you create tiny tears in your muscle fibers. This feels uncomfortable, even painful. But your body responds by rebuilding the muscles stronger than before. The stress of lifting created the adaptation. Fear works similarly. When you experience anxiety and successfully navigate through it, when you feel afraid and act anyway, when you sit with discomfort without being destroyed by it, your brain builds new capacity, new neural pathways, stronger regulation systems, better executive control. This is why exposure therapy works, why people who gradually face their fears often find that the fears lose power. It's not just habituation, though that's part of it. It's that your brain is literally building new capabilities to handle the fear more effectively. Your fear then isn't just something to endure. It's something that, if you engage with it properly, makes you neurologically more capable. Every time you feel afraid and don't let it control you, you're building brain architecture that will serve you for the rest of your life. And there's research on something else, something about the relationship between anxiety and performance. You've probably heard of the Yerkes-Dodson curve. It's a principle in psychology that describes how arousal, including fear and anxiety, affects performance. Too little arousal, and you're not motivated, not focused, not performing well. Too much arousal and you're overwhelmed, scattered, unable to function effectively. But there's a middle zone, a sweet spot where moderate anxiety actually enhances performance, makes you sharper, more focused, more careful. Athletes call this being in the zone. Performers call it having just enough nervous energy. It's the feeling of being challenged but not overwhelmed. Your anxiety, when it's at the right level, is actually helping you. It's making you pay attention. It's focusing your effort. It's ensuring you don't coast through on autopilot. The complete absence of anxiety often leads to complacency, carelessness, underperformance. This doesn't mean you should stay anxious all the time. Chronic high anxiety is harmful, but it does mean that some anxiety, the right amount of anxiety, serves a purpose. It's not just ancient alarm systems misfiring. It's activation that, when properly calibrated, enhances your ability to handle challenges. Learning to work with your anxiety rather than against it. Learning to find that sweet spot where fear motivates without overwhelming. That's a skill, one that takes practice. But it's possible, and people who develop this skill often find that their anxiety becomes less of a burden and more of a tool. Still uncomfortable sometimes, but also useful, even valuable. Now let's talk about something that might seem contradictory. The connection between fear and joy. You might think these are opposites. Fear is negative, joy is positive. Fear is something to avoid, joy is something to seek. But human emotion doesn't work that way. It's more complex, more interconnected. Research on emotion suggests that people who feel emotions deeply, including negative emotions like fear and sadness, also tend to feel positive emotions more intensely. It's not that you can selectively experience only pleasant feelings. Emotional depth is bidirectional. The capacity to feel profound fear often comes packaged with the capacity to feel profound joy. And there's something else. Something about how contrast affects experience. The joy you feel after successfully facing a fear, it's more intense than the joy you'd feel if you'd never been afraid. The relief, the pride, the sense of accomplishment, these positive emotions are amplified by the difficulty of what you just navigated. Think about your ancestors again. The joy they felt when the long night ended and everyone had survived. The relief when a dangerous hunt succeeded. The celebration when a feared winter passed and spring arrived. These positive emotions were made more powerful by the fear that preceded them. The contrast created depth. Your fear is creating the possibility for deeper joy. Every time you face something that scares you and come through it, every time you sit with anxiety and watch it eventually pass, you're creating experiences of relief and pride that wouldn't exist without the initial fear. You're earning positive emotions that feel more meaningful because they weren't freely given. They came after struggle. This isn't to romanticize suffering. Fear is still uncomfortable. Anxiety still takes a toll. But perhaps it's worth acknowledging that the positive emotions you experience, they're richer, deeper, more meaningful because of the negative emotions you've also felt. Your emotional range, including fear, is what makes your emotional life textured and full. Let's pause here for a moment. Let's take stock of what we've explored. Fear as the foundation of courage. Fear as the teacher of empathy. Fear as the cousin of creativity. Fear as the motivation for meaningful examination. Fear as the builder of neural resilience. Fear as the contrast that makes joy sweeter. These aren't small things. These are some of the most valuable aspects of human experience. And all of them are connected, in ways direct or indirect, to your capacity for fear, to that ancient inheritance you've been carrying through this long night. This doesn't mean fear is pleasant. It doesn't mean you should be grateful for panic attacks or celebrate insomnia or embrace anxiety as a wonderful gift. Fear still hurts. Anxiety still exhausts. The suffering is real, but maybe, just maybe, you can see fear as more complex than enemy or malfunction. Maybe you can recognize it as part of the full package of being human. The difficult part, yes. The uncomfortable part, absolutely. But also the part that makes possible some of what you value most about yourself and others. Now, as we move toward the end of our journey together, let's talk about something practical. Something you can take with you when this video ends and you're left alone with your thoughts in the darkness. How do you actually make peace with fear? Not eliminate it. Not pretend it doesn't exist, but genuinely come to terms with it as a permanent part of your experience. First, you practice recognition. When fear arises, you notice it. You name it. This is fear. Not judgment, not analysis, just recognition. Your body is activating an ancient alarm. Your nervous system is doing what it evolved to do. This is fear. This simple act of recognition creates a tiny bit of space, a moment where you're observing the fear rather than being completely consumed by it. You're not the fear. You're the person experiencing fear. That distinction matters. Second, you practice curiosity. Instead of immediately trying to make the fear stop, you get interested in it. What kind of fear is this? Which ancient alarm is firing? Fear of social judgment, fear of the unknown, fear of isolation, fear of your own fear. Understanding which fear you're experiencing helps you recognize whether it's proportionate to the situation. If you're feeling the fear of being hunted while giving a presentation, you can recognize the mismatch. Your body is preparing you for physical danger that doesn't exist. This isn't information about the present. It's ancient programming running on outdated information. This doesn't make the fear disappear, but it changes your relationship with it. You can acknowledge, my body thinks I'm in danger, but I know I'm actually safe. This feeling will pass. I don't need to act as if the danger is real. Third, you practice acceptance. Not resignation, not giving up, but genuine acceptance that fear is part of your experience. That it will visit you sometimes, that it's not a sign of weakness or failure. It's just what happens when you have a human nervous system in a human body trying to navigate a complex world. Acceptance doesn't mean liking fear or wanting it. It means stopping the fight against its existence, stopping the layer of suffering that comes from believing you shouldn't feel this way. Fear is uncomfortable enough on its own. The self-judgment about feeling fearful makes it worse. When you can feel afraid without also feeling ashamed of being afraid, when you can experience anxiety without the meta-anxiety about experiencing anxiety, the overall burden decreases, not eliminated but lighter, more manageable. Fourth, you practice self-compassion. You speak to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you love who is struggling. Not, what's wrong with you, but this is really hard. I understand why you're afraid. It makes sense. Your ancestors survived because they took their fear seriously. You're not broken for feeling afraid. You're carrying forward an inheritance that kept your genetic line alive for millions of years. That deserves respect, not contempt. And when fear is particularly intense, when you're really struggling, you remind yourself, Every ancestor I have made it through their fear. Every single one. I come from an unbroken line of people who survived despite being afraid. I can do this too. Fifth, you practice action. Not always immediately, not without acknowledging the fear first, but eventually you practice doing things while afraid. Small things, manageable things, things that scare you but won't actually harm you. Each time you act despite fear, you're teaching your brain that the fear, while real, doesn't have to control you. You're building evidence that you can handle discomfort. That anxiety doesn't mean danger, that you're more capable than your fear wants you to believe, and this is gradual. This is patient work. But over time, over many small acts of courage, your fear loses some of its power. Not all of it. You'll probably always feel fear, but its ability to paralyze you, to dictate your choices, to keep you small and confined, that diminishes. And finally, you practice gratitude. Not for the suffering, not for the discomfort, but for what your fear has taught you, for the empathy it's given you, for the questions it's made you ask, for the growth it's demanded, for the evidence it's provided that you're stronger than you thought. This is hard, especially on nights like tonight when fear is present and persistent and you just want it to stop. But perhaps, in quieter moments, you can find some appreciation for the fullness of your emotional life, for the depth that comes from struggle, for the humanity that comes from being vulnerable. Your fear connects you to everyone who came before you, to every ancestor who felt afraid and survived anyway, to every human currently alive who's also lying awake with anxiety, to the fundamental truth that being alive means being vulnerable, and being vulnerable means sometimes being afraid. As you're lying there now, feeling whatever you're feeling, perhaps you can soften toward it. Not embrace it, not welcome it, but stop fighting it quite so hard. Let it be there. Let yourself be afraid without needing to fix it immediately. Let your body run through its ancient protocols while your conscious mind knows you're safe. The fear will pass. It always does. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But it passes. Because fear is designed to be temporary. It's meant to activate in response to threats and then subside when the threat passes. Your body knows how to do this. You don't have to force it. You just have to allow it. And while you're waiting for the fear to pass, while you're sitting with the discomfort, perhaps you can remember that this feeling, difficult as it is part of what makes you human. Part of what connects you to the long chain of humanity stretching back through time. Your fear is old, older than language, older than civilization, older than anything you might consider modern human culture. It's been with your species for hundreds of thousands of years, and it's still here, still functioning and still trying to protect you from dangers both real and imagined. That's remarkable when you think about it, that something so ancient can persist so clearly in modern consciousness, that your body remembers things your mind has forgotten, that evolution has written its lessons so deeply into your biology that they continue to shape your experience every single day. You're a walking museum of human history, a living archive of every challenge your species has faced and overcome. And fear is one of the exhibits, one of the artifacts, a reminder that you come from survivors, that survival for a very long time required vigilance, caution, and the willingness to be afraid when fear was appropriate. It's okay if you don't feel grateful for this inheritance right now. It's okay if you still wish you didn't have to feel this way. The goal isn't to love your fear. The goal is just to understand it, to recognize it for what it is, to stop adding judgment on top of discomfort, to make peace, not with anxiety itself, but with the fact that anxiety is part of your experience as a human being. And maybe, on the best days, you can see your fear as a strange kind of companion. Not a friend exactly, but something familiar. Something that's been with you your entire life and will be with you until the end. Something that, despite the discomfort it causes, has also taught you things, deepened you, made you more capable and more empathetic than you might have been without it. The night is almost over now. Not the literal night, perhaps, but the night of our journey together through the landscape of fear. We've walked a long way, from the African savanna to modern bedrooms, from ancient predators to contemporary anxiety, from the origins of fear to the possibility of peace with it. You're still here, still listening, still breathing. The fear that might have brought you to this video, the anxiety that might have kept you awake, it hasn't destroyed you. It never will, because you're made of the same stuff as all your ancestors who survived their fear. You carry their resilience, their strength, their capacity to endure. Tomorrow, the fear might return, probably will return. That's okay. It's just doing what it evolved to do. And you know now where it comes from, what it's trying to protect you from, why it sometimes misfires, how to recognize it without being controlled by it. You have tools now, understanding, perspective, the knowledge that your fear is ancient and automatic and not always accurate, that you can feel afraid while knowing you're safe, that courage isn't the absence of fear but action despite it, and you have company. Every person on Earth carries similar fears, ancient alarms from ancient times, still firing, still trying to protect. We're all walking around with Pleistocene brains in a modern world, all struggling sometimes with the mismatch between what we feel and what's actually dangerous. Your fear doesn't make you alone, it connects you to humanity past and present, to everyone who's ever felt afraid in the darkness, to the fundamental vulnerability of being alive and aware and caring about survival. So rest now, let your body soften. Let the fear be there if it needs to be, but don't feed it with attention or resistance. Just let it run its course like weather passing through, while you remain still, safe, held by the darkness that your ancestors learned to survive. The predators are gone, the ancient dangers have passed. Your body doesn't fully know this yet. It's still running old programs, still maintaining old vigilance. But your mind knows you're safe. You've always been safe here, in this moment, in this breath. Tomorrow you'll wake up and the fear might still be there, quieter perhaps, but present. That's okay. It's just your ancient inheritance keeping watch. Thank it if you can. And then go about your day carrying it with you, letting it be part of your experience without letting it be the totality of your experience. You're more than your fear. You've always been more than your fear. But you're also not separate from it. It's woven through you, this ancient alarm system, this evolutionary inheritance, this proof that you come from survivors. And now, finally, you can rest. The journey is complete. The story is told. From the first human nights around ancient fires to this modern night in your own bed, fear has been the constant companion. Sometimes burden, sometimes teacher, always present, always trying in its clumsy ancient way to keep you alive. Sleep well, dream peacefully. Your fear has done its job for tonight. It's scanned for threats, found none that require immediate action. It can rest now, and so can you. You're safe. You've always been safe. And the long human night, that dangerous time when fear was the only thing keeping your ancestors alive, it's over now. The fires still burn, but they're metaphorical. The darkness is empty. The vigilance can soften, just for tonight, just for now. Everything else can wait until morning. Rest, fellow survivor. Rest, carrier of ancient fear. Rest, beautiful, brave human, trying to live well despite being occasionally appropriately, understandably afraid. The fear that brought you here tonight, it's not your enemy. It's your inheritance, your connection to everyone who came before, your reminder that you're alive and vulnerable and precious. And that's enough for tonight. That's everything. Sleep now. The fear will keep watch. It always does. And tomorrow when you wake, you'll remember that you survived another night. Added one more day to the unbroken chain stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Your ancestors would be proud. Good night.